Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Tulley, President and Executive Writing Coach at Defend, Publish, and Lead. Welcome to episode 175, Idea Capture. I've been meaning to do an episode on idea capture for a very long time because this is one of my favorite questions to ask when I do a faculty workshop on writing and trying to get a publication. And what I mean by idea capture is this. I will pose this question to faculty. I'll say, you're driving along in your car and you have a great idea for an article. Where does it go? And everybody usually looks at me blankly, or a couple people will say, oh, I'll scribble it down on a piece of paper in my car, or I might make a quick voice note, or I'll write it on my hand. But sometimes those actual places where we capture ideas don't actually translate into making anything. Because if you think about the way that academics tend to work, we probably have ideas all the time. We probably think through writing and projects, as we're reading things or as we talk to somebody else, or maybe even in the middle of teaching a class. And so what I want to do in this episode is just show a couple of places where I actually make the next step of getting an idea out of my brain, or maybe I verbalize it to somebody, but I take it from that place to the next place where it has a better shot of growing into something. Now, with that said, not all ideas are going to become writing projects, but some of them will become, for example, conference presentations. So maybe I want to explore an idea, but I don't want to do a full-on presentation about it. Sometimes that's a good spot. I do some writing for Inside Higher Education occasionally. Sometimes things I'm interested in aren't necessarily best for a full-blown research article, but they're maybe a little bit more important for public scholarship that I want to put out there, that maybe a LinkedIn post might be a place for something. So I'm trying to remember some of these great ideas I have in all kinds of places that maybe are not conducive to writing them down. And what I'm going to show on screen right now are just what some of my idea capture spaces look like. If you're listening audio only, you don't need to see these. I'll describe what you're looking at. But if you want to check them out, they're on YouTube. I know I just talked with somebody about this, that many of our podcast listeners don't necessarily go to YouTube. You tend to be an audio only group, and that's great. I always describe what's on screen. But if you ever want to see anything, our YouTube channel has the same podcast content as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all that. Okay, so let's take a look at some of my idea captures. And what I try to do when I'm doing an idea capture is I try to be very deliberate and only put ideas in a couple of places. I wish I could just have one place, but I have found out a long time ago that that doesn't work very well for me. And part of the reason it doesn't work really well for me is that I don't always have an idea in the same exact spot. So where I might get a great idea, for example, walking the dog when I'm holding the dog leash, we have an active 1-year-old dog, that's not really a great place for me to whip out a piece of paper and write down an idea. But I could make a very quick voice note on my phone. But other times I need to be quiet. I can't make a voice note on my phone, for example, when I'm in the middle of a meeting. I might need to write that down. So the pictures that are showing on screen are some of my places. I'm going to walk through each of them and why I'm using that particular location. So one of the places that I take notes when I'm reading is sometimes on a Post-it if it's a library book. So the image that's on screen is me busy reading along, and then there's a Post-it inside it with a bunch of notes on it. I still get a fair number of library books that I can't write in myself. And so one of the things that's helpful for me, at least, is just to have one of those longer Post-its that has lines on it. They look like index cards. And for me, that's usually enough to capture enough of any kind of ideas that I have about when I'm reading the article. So one of the things that I like about reading and then coming up with ideas from that reading is that sometimes that's the best way to insert yourself in a scholarly conversation, because as you're reading along, you might think of a way that what the author said connects with what you're doing, or there's a line of inquiry that you've already tried, but you've got this new direction you want to go. Sometimes I argue with the readings. That's what scholarly discourse is all about. So I sometimes will put, questions or concerns I have about some of the claims being made. When I can, though, if I own the book, I actually write the ideas right then and there in the piece, in the place, in the margins, sometimes on top of the content. But for many of us, that's not the way that we're able to do it because we have library books or for whatever reason we want that note. So I just use one of those longer Post-it notes and stick it right there. I usually only have one Post-it note per reading or per chapter because I learned a long time ago that I am not the kind of person that can make little flags and Post-its on every single page in the reading that I want to do, mainly because I just never look at them. It's too overwhelming. But if I have, say, 5 Post-its in a book, I have to be very judicious about what I'm going to put in or on that Post-it because there's just not a lot of space. And so usually what I'll do is write down either an article idea, a conference presentation idea, and so on. Sometimes again with those questions or other notes that I want to make. So this is a very broad engagement with the reading, but that's one of the places where I capture it. I also find that having that reading note inside the actual reading for as long as I have the book is good for me because that way I don't separate what I was thinking about from the reading itself. Like I don't physically separate them. Once I have to return the book or once I'm ready to turn the idea into a project, that idea does something or that Post-it does something else, which I'll explain in a follow-up podcast to this one. It'll be probably the one right after it. So another place where I take notes, and I would say this is probably my number one place and my preferred place, if at all possible, is audio dictating a note to InkPad. We've done episodes on InkPad before. I will link to one in the show notes again. I'm a big fan. This is, again, a free app. I say this all the time about all the tools that I promote on this podcast, but I pretty much only want free ones, and I want ones that I can learn how to use in 5 minutes. So that, those are my criteria. I know sometimes there's probably better, more sophisticated tools out there, but I love InkPad. It's great. And why I like it is I essentially, and I'm actually holding up my phone for video listeners, but I just grab my phone, I open up InkPad, I can click a blue button for a new note, and there's a little microphone there. I can just audio dictate a note. And why I like InkPad over something like voice memos is because InkPad actually captures my writing on a yellow legal pad looking image. So another show and tell in this particular episode is I like yellow legal pads. I'm holding up my physical one, but on the screen, I'm showing what an InkPad note looks like. So sometimes I'll dictate the start of an article. That's what's on screen right now. Sometimes I'll dictate a bulleted list. But for me, InkPad has been a great place to kind of capture these ideas in spaces where I cannot write something down. In the car, when I'm driving, I can just hit the button quickly, audio dictate away. I can do the same thing with walking the dog or any other place when I do it. And as a benefit, InkPad actually captures the words in type, not handwriting. And one of the things that helps with that is that I can download the note and email it to myself, and I can just copy and paste it. So a lot of times my articles now will start this way, where I will just copy and paste whatever I just said into the note, drop it into a draft, and start working with that. It's not perfect. So one of the things that's, I think, important to note here is that, some of the words are spelled wrong. I have to correct some things, but I can talk much faster than I can scribble something down. And if I only have a couple of minutes to just get some ideas on about a presentation I want to do or about, a short article I want to do, this is the way to go. I've also done many notes about an upcoming book on academic writing project management this way. So this is probably the first book where I would argue that probably about half of the book has been written through audio writing. So InkPad's another spot. So far, just if you're keeping track, we did a Post-it inside any kind of reading I'm doing if it's physical. I didn't say much about online reading, and that is because as a reader, I read very little from on-screen, let's say on-screen words. I just don't do it in that kind of a way where I'm reading like something very intense that way. I usually print it out or I get a library book. I do, however, take reading notes from articles when I have them on screen in Penzu, which is not an app I'm going to show here today because it's not one of my frequent idea capture places. It's more for a place where I capture what kinds of content I want from readings to get into my writing. And so that'll be something either in a later podcast or a workshop coming up. It's been on my list for a while. But since this episode's about idea capture, I don't necessarily take it from there. So I usually use a Post-it or I do InkPad. Probably if I was looking at a digital article and I had a great idea, I would probably just open up my phone and dictate into InkPad. So those are the two so far. The third one that I'm showing on the screen is, let's say I'm at a spot like a conference. So I might have a lot of ideas about a lot of different things. I'm not holding a physical reading, and I can't dictate into my phone because someone else is talking during the conference presentation. So one spot that I capture a lot of ideas is just in a black notebook that's a little bit smaller than the size of a pad of paper. In fact, I will show this on screen. It's just like a little black flat notebook. Like I said, a little bit smaller than a size of notebook paper. And that's a notebook that I'll just take with me to conferences. And as I listen, I usually write the name of the conference session and any ideas down on that, on the pages. So a nice thing about having a notebook is I can obviously take lots of notes. Sometimes in here, I'll draw boxes, which is something that's on the screen. Right now I have a box around something that's telling me that's an idea. So it's not a real great system, but boxes around anything tend to be ideas that I want to make sure go somewhere where I want to track them. Lastly, where ideas tend to go when they start moving into a spot where I don't want to forget about them. So let's say I have a Post-it about something I read in a book or in a scholarly article that I want to make sure becomes a project. Like I don't want to lose that idea. Same thing with an InkPad note, same thing with anything that's in my notebook that just goes to conferences with me. The next spot for these are for these projects to show up in my Asana board. I've mentioned Asana as a spot where I'm using for project management. Before that, I used just straight up Microsoft Word table. I wrote about it a while back in Inside Higher Education. So if you feel like going back into the archives there, it was an article that was titled something like, "It's July, have you started writing yet?" And it was a chart where I basically just tracked all my projects and what was happening with them. I like Asana, and for the record, I'm using the free version. I like it just because it's one spot where I know everything is. I can put links in, I can put images in, I can put in all kinds of stuff. But what I'm showing on screen right now is just a list of my projects. They're not all listed on the screen because one of the cool things about Asana is you can have lots of projects in there. But once I'm ready to turn an idea into a project, or at least I want to make sure that I have the ideas listed in here as a potential project, is that I just click a create project button and name it. So one of the things that is showing up in here and on screen, there's some projects that are archived, like I've actually completed them. I've already turned them in. I did a chapter for a book on writing emergencies, a forthcoming edited collection. I've already turned that chapter in, so that project shows as archived. But one of the projects that I'm working on right now is an idea. I have used shorthand to call it project narrative because that's the institute that I'm working with this particular semester while I'm on sabbatical. But really, it's an idea about something else. Like I can call it what it is. I've got a lot of shorthand in these titles where I know what the idea is, but you might name your project a specific idea. So one of the things that I'm going to show in the next podcast or one after, so one sometime soon, will be when do I actually turn an idea into a physical project in here. So one of the things that happens with this system is that some ideas just remain ideas. So they don't ever go anywhere. Like I might read a really interesting article in one of the scholarly journals I subscribe to. I have a great idea, and then 6 weeks goes by and I kind of either have forgotten about it, it never comes back to me. That's okay. Sometimes that just happens with ideas. But one of the things that tends to happen, at least for me, is that I will sometimes see, for example, a call for papers for a conference or for a collection or something that is something about that idea. And I'll remember, oh, I read about that Post-it's in that book. Now, I probably need a little bit better of a system. So one of the things that I'm looking at doing with this black idea notebook is just slapping some of the Post-its in there. For example, like when I have to return a library book, I can't leave it with married to the reading it has. That's one way. Another way, though, I'm going to actually show in an upcoming episode what I do with that Post-it. So I basically like take it and I turn it into a project in the Asana project management board. One of the things I used to do a little bit better of a job with when I had just a straight up Microsoft Word table and then later like a Google Sheet, I used to track every single idea I ever had. I'd put them all in the list and just put them near the bottom. And that was really great because I would have a bank of like 40 different ideas I could make a project out of. But one of the things, at least I found from this, is sometimes individual ideas for projects. So when I'm capturing them, sometimes they're all about the same project. So 9 ideas might seem like they're all discrete writing projects, but a lot of times they're not. They're really all part of one bigger project. So that's one of the things that I'll sort through in the follow-up episode to this one. All right, so some other things I want to throw out there to you as we close this episode. One would be a lot of ideas we have are ideas that we might want to share with the more general public. And so this particular summer, we are going to run our Writing Like a Teacher, expanding the audience for your nonfiction writing again. This was a really popular workshop last summer. It's facilitated by Jim Lang, who's one of our coaches and the author of Small Teaching and many, many other books about educational development with students. And one of the great things about this workshop is that it does work with really small ideas. So for example, you might have this really small idea that really couldn't become a full-fledged article, it couldn't become a book, but it would be great in, say, a Substack newsletter or a LinkedIn post or something like that, or even a series of posts on X if you're using X. So some of the things that I think will be really helpful in this workshop would be to think through, where are my ideas? Are they big ideas? So they could be an article or a book. Are they smaller ideas where they're more like fragments? Could they be a Substack post, or are they kind of in the middle? They could be a conference presentation. This workshop would be really great to sort that out. So all of our events are on Eventbrite if you want to check this one out. And if you look in the show notes, there's a discount code for all of our workshops. So if you want to check that out, you can get it there. I also want to let you know, speaking of discounts, our sponsor, the Textbook and Academic Authors Association, they are running a great new member special where the first year to get TAA as a membership is only $30. So if you've never joined, this is definitely the time to join them now. Again, I only allow sponsors on the podcast of organizations I actually use. And so this is one that I'm very happy to be a member of. If you have already joined TAA and you've already heard me talk about it, you can actually renew it and use our discount code for that. So that will be in our show notes again. But that's another spot that you can look to see how to do that. I'll make sure that I have all of it linked there. Hopefully this helped with idea capture this week, and I look forward to sharing with you how an idea becomes an article in a future episode. Happy writing.